Welcome. We are convening here for the Career Exploration and Career Development Experience Pilot Kickoff. And so this was an opportunity through the Illinois State Board of Education, and we have Karen Lockhart on the line who's going to explain and give an overview of that here in just a moment. If this is totally new to you, that there's a grant opportunity through ISBE, we are going to take some time and do an overview of why we're here. But my name's Heather Penzak. I'm a policy and program manager here with Education System Center, and we'll walk through some of the pieces that we'll be working through together here this year. But generally, our team is here to help provide technical assistance and professional development and support to you all as you engage in piloting career exploration and career development experiences in your spaces. And we're going to walk through and define those and share some resources today. But welcome so much, everyone. Excited to have you all here. And so would love to know just for a moment who is here today. So if you could take a moment and write your name, title, organization in the chat, that would be wonderful. And just some housekeeping pieces too, muting computers and or your phones if you're not sharing with the group, but very much throughout here, would love for you to unmute yourself or use the chat to provide any comments or questions throughout today's discussion. Would also like to have John, my colleague John, introduce themselves, and then I'll turn to Karen as well from ISBE.
Hi, everyone. This is John Furr, the Executive Director with Education System Center at NIU. So very happy to be with you this morning and to be able to talk about this exciting work.
Thanks, John. And Karen?
Good morning, I'm Karen from ISBE. I've met most of you before, or at least talked to you, so it's good to be here with you. Welcome any questions. I will be working with you all on the grant management side of this, so let me know if you need anything.
Wonderful, thanks, Karen. And thank you all, excited to see who's here today. I know we have a lot of our EFEs and we have a lot of our school contacts here as well. So really this space and how I'm going to be working directly with you all is through those of you who are really on the ground implementing these experiences. But before we really dive into the actual content of today's presentation, a lot of what we're going to be doing here as we begin each of these communities of practice is I want you to put yourself in the space of a young person, right? So we're going to move, instead of kind of doing a large group breakout discussion, I want you to start thinking about when you were in middle or high school. What did you want to be when you quote unquote grew up? I think sometimes I still wonder what I'm going to be when I grow up. And I would like you to think about why you wanted to be that, how you knew you wanted to be that. And so I'm going to move us into some breakout rooms here in a moment, just 2 or 3 people in each room. Going to spend maybe like 2 minutes in there. So if you could introduce yourself to the people who are in the room and share this question. So middle, high school, what did you want to be when you grew up and why? What does anyone want to share without doing it? Or maybe raise your hand or put a thumbs up if you were in the job today that you thought you would be when you were in middle or high school. Is that true for you folks here? I don't think I could have imagined that I would be in education policy as a middle or high school student. Don't even know if I knew that that existed in life. I wanted to be a marine biologist, and then I worked with fish and realized I don't like working with fish. And it was a big sign that I shouldn't do that. But would love to hear from you all if there's anyone who wants to share what they wanted to be when they grew up and why.
Hi everyone, I'm Suzanne Condrina from the Marine Area Career System, and when I was in college I thought I wanted to be an attorney, and so I majored in political science and I got my postgraduate certificate as a paralegal, and I worked in a law firm for 2 years, and I thought I would die. I hated it. I hated every second of it for 2 years, commuting downtown, and just the whole law firm environment was very stressful. So I ended up finding out that what I thought I wanted to do was nothing like I wanted to do. So anyway, that's that.
Thanks, Suzanne. And Alexander, I see that comment. I used to have my neighbor across the street. I would play school with them and I would give them homework and be a teacher. So I think it was bubbling up for me then, but then I went this marine biologist route somehow. Taught biology later on, but I definitely think that that educator part of us does start early in our lives for sure.
Heather, I'll jump in here just to share what Brian and I talked about. Not that what we wanted to grow up to be was funny or anything like that, but it was both directly related to the careers that our families were involved in. And so we found that interesting, just the role that family plays, and perhaps the challenge that we might have connecting our young people who might not have a strong support system at home, that to identify potential future careers. So.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point, Nick. I mean, I think about to the piece about educators. Why do a lot of us want to be educators from early ages? Like, because we see a lot of educators in our lives generally, right? Pretty much all of us at some point go to a school building and see those people. But very much just wanted to take this moment and thank you all for spending some time and getting to know each other and answering that question. But as we think about work-based learning, as we think about any of this space, right, we're all just trying to grapple with what we want to be when we grow up and how those ideas are formed, whether it's who we're seeing, what we're being involved in. Many just small moments can totally change that idea, right? And getting that experience through these career exploration or through these career development experiences, especially early in a young person's life, further helps them cement that idea, understand themselves better, reflect on what they like and what they don't like. When I used to have interns go to spaces that they didn't like, I was like, this is actually a really good thing for you. I'm so glad that you found out that your idea of what a lawyer, for example, is not actually what it is, right? Like you might see it on TV or something. Maybe you have someone in your social network that's a lawyer, but then when they actually engage in it, it really is eye-opening for students. And it can really clearly direct their paths, what they do even when they graduate high school and the investment they make in themselves. So I'll do kind of some of these fun questions each time just to center us back and who we were as a young person, how we thought about that, and to Nick's point too, how we understood that and what that was influenced by, whether it was our family, our school, our friends, and any professionals we might have known in our life or experiences we've had. And so for today, really just want to take some time doing a review. I'm going to turn to Karen here in just a moment, just to provide an overview of this grant opportunity through the Illinois State Board of Education. And then I'm going to take some time and definitely want to pause in between each of these for questions and for you all to also share, but to talk through some state frameworks and resources for work-based learning. And then also kind of dive into some resources and promising practices for both career exploration type experiences. And we're going to come to a common understanding too there of how we're defining that through this opportunity and also as a state. And then the same thing for career development experiences. And I know some folks on this line are piloting one or the other or both of these. And so we're going to have some time too at the end for breakout room discussions, but we also throughout this, please put questions in the chat, unmute yourself, ask those out loud. Definitely want to make sure that we're providing and answering your questions as we head into the school year and we head into implementing these pieces for young people. And so I'm going to turn over here to Karen just to provide an overview of the grant opportunity.
Good morning, everyone. So the purpose of this grant was to identify where the gaps are in resources for work-based learning and kind of fund some pilots so we can develop some of these new resources and then share the best practices across the state. So this was from 2021 CTEI funds. So some of the same, some of the same rules would apply to the spending here, but you could start spending it this summer and carry it over through FY22. So my role in this is to help manage from the grant side, where Heather's more of the expert on the activity side. But there will be a reporting document that I will try to get out to you in the next few weeks. I'm sorry, I'm inundated with grant applications right now, but I'm going to try to get that out. And some of you who were at the retreat in Peoria last week, I had hoped to have that out last Friday, the new work-based learning manual. More input was given on the manual, so I actually added some more sections to it, and I can't tell you how many times I thought I was done with it, and it just keeps improving, let's say that. I'm looking forward to putting everyone's input into that manual and just kind of have it evolve as we start identifying, what works best at the school levels. So I'm going to add my email address into the chat. I do know a lot of you, but I want everyone to have access to it. If you have any questions at all of, hey, we started this, now we want to incorporate something different into our plan. Can we do it? Throw me the questions. I'm happy to help out on that side. So I will add that to the chat and welcome any questions.
Wonderful. Thank you, Karen. I have Karen's information included as well at the end of this presentation, and we're going to share the recording and this presentation and all those materials and everything from today afterwards as well for you all. And so as Karen mentioned, in my role, I'm really going to be here as a part of Education System Center and supporting the work for you to lead communities of practice. We as a team work on multiple levels. We work at a state level, working closely with our state agency partners. Literally right here, you can see our collaboration and partnership with ISBE, but we also work very closely with community. Some of you all who are on the line and thinking through your pathways in terms of your coursework and also your work-based learning and really helping and supporting the guidance and implementation of those. I'll also talk you through a few spaces that I lead as well. We have a work-based learning network here in Illinois called IWIN that's going to meet in the months actually that this group is not meeting. So you all will be invited to that to have an additional space to hear and learn from others throughout the state. But really the role here is to support communities of practice for you all, providing guidance, technical assistance, any content that we cover, any resources that we share really is going to reflect the implementation needs and questions from you all. So I've reviewed your pilot plans, but also as Karen has mentioned, if those are changing, right, I'll be looped into that as well. At each of these communities of practice, I'm going to have a Google form as well for you to fill out what questions or needs you're having to make sure, again, each time we meet, I'm bringing in presenters or bringing in resources who can really speak directly to what it all is that you want to accomplish. We're going to record all these sessions. There's also a resource folder that's going to include all the presentations. It's going to have recordings in it. It's going to have any materials that we share. And that is something too, as Karen spoke to that resource bank, very much throughout the year, as you're utilizing materials, utilizing resources, learning some best practices that are working really well. We definitely want to capture those, put those into the folder, and then ultimately have this statewide bank so that others even outside of this pilot opportunity can learn from what you all have done, implement those resources to fit their context and needs within their community. But each of these communities of practice, today we're still going to have some time for some breakout rooms and questions, but I don't have presentations from communities today. This really is a kickoff to provide some initial resources and framing for the upcoming school year. But each community of practice moving forward will highlight, 1 to 2 pilot sites who are doing something really well and want to share with the group, but also some of those exemplar Illinois communities who might not be a part of this pilot, but are really implementing an innovative career exploration and or career development experience. And so in terms of kind of the scope of the year and timeline of the engagements, we are in August right now. So we're kicking off. We have EFEs here. We also have representatives from the pilot schools. There's going to be an opportunity for you as well as you're thinking and hearing today in that Google form at the end for you to flag anyone else who should be involved in these conversations, right? To make sure that they get added to the invites and communication. And then we're going to meet on a bi-monthly basis. And so we're really going to have like 3 formal community of practices. But in between those, if you have questions, you want to reach out to me, a lot of what I can do too is help connect you with others throughout the state who are doing something similar to what you want to accomplish. So you can learn from them, provide resources as well. But bi-monthly is when we'll meet as a whole group and have those formal communities of practice. And then at the end, would really love to have a showcase. So having EFEs, pilot schools come together, present on their experience, the best practices, lessons learned, resources developed, and insights, and really just celebrate all that you've been doing and accomplished throughout the school year. So before we move on to just an overview from state frameworks and resources, are there any questions on the grant opportunity in general or kind of timeline for the school year?
I have one. Is there a curriculum provided? My school is like a junior high, so I'll be doing 6th through 8th.
In terms of like a curriculum for a career exploration or anything like that, or?
Right, or do we just kind of, based on our goals and objectives, do we just kind of do our own thing?
Yeah, so we won't provide any like explicit like curriculum. That would be very much based on what you all want to do, but we'll provide like what is a career exploration and some resources for it. But yeah, that can be a part of your pilot, is even going through that curriculum and thinking about how you're embedding that within the course.
Okay, and I was looking through some other materials and it says give the kids some in-house opportunities for careers. Since I have 11 to 13-year-olds, do you have to get parent consent for kids to do these things, you know, since they're younger?
Yeah, I think that would be based on whatever the parameters are within your school or within your region, what those like forms look like.
Okay.
Mhm.
We might get that manual released. I'm knocking wood this week. I think that'll answer some of your questions too. As Heather said, it depends a lot on the type of activity, but there's a lot of examples in this manual for incorporating it into classes, and then a separate section for like standalone, what used to be called co-op. So I think that'll be helpful when that gets released. And if we haven't added it to this presentation, I'll also add the link where that manual is going to be housed, because the link has been built. It's just a matter of getting the final draft in there.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, but Dina, those are absolutely things we can talk through with you, and we'll share models for these communities of practice.
Great.
And I see folks answering the question about EFEs in the chat. Thank you all. So I'm going to go over just some general framing, the state frameworks within the space, and kind of what these are all aligning to answer those questions specifically about what is a career exploration experience, what is a career development experience. And so through the Illinois Career Pathways Dictionary, which is going to be linked in here, and I'm sure some of you all have already received in materials, there is a defined work-based learning continuum. So again, this idea of what do you want to be when you grow up? Well, how do you engage an individual along a continuum? So starting from career awareness, where they tend to be more passive, right? They're taking some surveys or watching some videos, right? Starting to grapple with what they want to do. And then they move into career exploration, where they would actually be engaging one-on-one with industry folks, being able to ask them questions, hear about different occupations within an industry area, right? They're really engaging directly with those individuals, whether it's virtual or in person. Those youth have an opportunity to ask questions that they want to know about. You move into a team-based challenge, which isn't part of this pilot, but is an experience where students would be working in teams. They'd be getting mentorship from an industry professional, and they'd be coming up with a solution or a way to address a real world problem within that industry area. Not part of this pilot opportunity here, but we have a lot of resources on that as well, if it's something you're interested in. And then you move into a career development experience, which is more of an intensive experience. This is where you have an individual really engaging directly, independently. They're working, you know, in a quote unquote like internship type experience, right? So they're showing up on their own, they're performing tasks, they're developing skills. This is really a strong moment when an individual knows, like, this is something I want to do. This is where my passions are. Here are the skills I have. Here are the skills I want or need to develop. And they've been geared up for that experience along the continuum. So they're not starting in a career development experience. They're having some opportunities before that to really then get to that experience. And by the time they're there, they tend to have a pretty strong understanding that that's the industry or occupation they want to go for. It could still change after that, which is also a win, right? For students to understand what they don't want to do and also what they do want to do. But as you can see along the bottom there, there is always that increasing intensity of employer engagement. And what Dina shared earlier too about the in-house, right? Sometimes thinking about who are your employers. We as schools, as organizations, we are employers, and we have industry experts within our own spaces. So sometimes, especially as you're thinking about piloting something new and you're still kind of working out your framework or your model or what resources you're going to have, sometimes doing something in-house can be a good kind of pilot test case for that, refine that, and then move on to work with some external partners. And so there's a lot of different resources out there for you all that capture some of these state frameworks and guidance. The Career Development Experience Toolkit, to Karen's point about the Work-Based Learning Manual, I went through so many different iterations. Sometimes I call it my memoir of managing a high school internship program here in Chicago. But I'll talk through this in a little bit more detail when we get to the career development experience portion of the presentation, but it really is there to provide guidance along all those different stages of implementation of that. So from just getting started all the way to wrapping up. Within the Career Pathways Dictionary, I'm going to refer to this a couple of times as we define career exploration and as we define a career development experience. But this really was developed through stakeholder groups of diverse stakeholders, so from education, industry, community-based organizations, to define what those different work-based learning experiences are. We all talk a lot about work-based learning, but we want to make sure that we're speaking the same language. And when we're saying career exploration, we're all understanding what that means, which is part of our time here together today. The state also—
can I have a question? Were we
Yeah.
supposed to receive this toolkit and information, or, you know, the dictionary thing yet? Because we have not received anything.
Yeah, so that's kind of also part of this kickoff here today. All these resources are in this presentation, going to be shared with you. You'll have access to all of this. Yep, good question. The state has also defined recommended essential employability and technical competencies, again, through stakeholder groups that represented all the different folks in the space, your education, your industry, community-based organizations. And so thinking through as a student would transition into post-secondary, what are those 10 essential employability competencies that they should gain? To the point about sometimes you might do an experience and realize it's not what you want to do, you still would have gained some essential employability competencies. So if you are on a health science trajectory, you do a team-based challenge and you're like, I don't want to be in health science anymore. You still would have gained some skills in teamwork and conflict resolution and communication, right? Any experience is going to be able to build those essential employability competencies. Those are applicable across industry area. But there's also competencies defined for the different endorsement areas, right? So in health sciences and technology, finance and business, IT, manufacturing, again, thinking through what are those kind of top 10 things that students should have to prepare them to be successful as they would transfer into a post-secondary plan. The one thing I would say with these competencies is, well, there's lots of things I would say, but one thing I would say with them is not one experience can address all competencies. So we've seen a lot of different examples of folks thinking through, okay, here's our 10 competencies. How do our different courses and our different work-based learning experiences address all these competencies? So as a student goes on their transition, they're going to be exposed to all these things, opportunities to develop those skills through multiple experiences rather than just one single experience. But these are really helpful as you're designing things, thinking about what you really want to focus in on, maybe picking a handful of these, 2 or 3 of them, to really develop within that career exploration or within that career development experience in both the essential employability and in the technical. And so a lot of this too is aligned to the College and Career Pathway Endorsement Framework. You know, those of you who are in the world of thinking about your college and career readiness indicators, a student who would earn this endorsement, it would satisfy requirements for that. But career development experiences are also a career ready indicator as part of the college and career readiness indicators. But really what this endorsement framework is, and I can send you resources on this too to do a deep dive of this, is all these different experiences together would really prepare a student to be even more ready for their post-secondary plan, right? They would have these professional learning experiences, which includes the career exploration and includes that career development experience along with those team-based challenges. They would have taken some career-focused coursework within that framework, and they would be academically ready in math and English. So by a student completing all these pieces, and I know there's communities on the line here who are aligning themselves and working towards offering endorsements within the different industry areas, but this would really set up a student to know what they want to do and be very prepared to enter a post-secondary plan. And again, if this is something that you want more details on, we have lots of different recordings and information on there. But just as a state framework and a guide for where career exploration and career development experiences also fit in. We also have a resource I wanted to mention for model programs of study guides. You know, really thinking about work-based learning, career exploration, career development experiences is not just standalone kind of extracurricular activities, but really embedded into a program of study for a student. So the courses that they're taking from their introductory, their skill development, their capstone courses how they're being engaged in career exploration, moving along that continuum as they move along with the difficulty of their coursework and engaging in that career focused coursework, and how they would move into something like a career development experience or even maybe a youth apprenticeship as they move beyond that. So these are there for you again as a resource to look at the different courses and how work-based learning has aligned to that and the recommendations there for the different industry areas. We also have within Illinois, IWIN, as I mentioned earlier. This is the Illinois Work-Based Learning Innovation Network. We launched this back in October of 2020. I always want to say 2019 for some reason, but really came together in this moment when we were all grappling with, like, what does it mean to offer something fully virtually or hybrid? And so similar to what these communities of practice will be, these are open to the broader state outside of the pilot. And we'll do a lot of same things that are done in the communities of practice for this pilot opportunity. So highlighting, exploring innovative models, engaging in conversations. How do we create work-based learning that ultimately provides broader and more equitable access? A big piece always though, and what's going to be true of this too, is how we build connections among communities. So myself and the presenters and folks that we'll bring on here have a lot of expertise and resources to share, but you also have a lot of expertise to bring to the space, and the way that you can make connections and work with one another is a really valuable part of communities of practice. And then also too, this is an opportunity through the state. So where are there needs for state policy changes, support systems, as we think about really being able to scale and offer high quality career exploration and career development experience within this space, but also work-based learning as a broader continuum of experiences. And so this last school year, just to kind of give you a snapshot of the pieces that we engaged in, we talked about all different topics, talked about team-based challenges, talked about career development experiences and health sciences, host-partner engagement, advancing equity through work-based learning. There's a really incredible policy brief from here to here out of New York about that. Looked at data insights and models. And then we also ended the year looking at how communities had implemented virtual or hybrid work-based learning for both career exploration and internships, what they learned from that, what they're going to do next year differently. And so the link to this resource hub is here. All of these webinars were recorded. The presentations are on that site. So if any of these kind of call out to you as something you'd want to learn more about, you can access that content on the IWIN site. And as mentioned, you all will be invited to those and feel free to share those invites, share those links. We very much encourage too for external partners to come. It's one piece to have, you know, the individuals on the school or the community-based organization level who are implementing and organizing these at these meetings, but it's also wonderful to have your partners. So who are hosting students, being mentors, coming in as guest speakers, supervising a student for something like an internship. We would love to engage them in the conversations as well. But for this next school year, we're going to do some design workshops. So I'm going to include resources there too within this presentation. But this past summer, I had a fun time in small groups, thinking through each experience along the continuum, doing some probing questions, entering some information in a template, and really thinking through how to design and workshop those. But again, we'll have bi-monthly communities of practice for that. They're going to be focused on specific endorsement areas. So this is the projected kind of flow of what that's going to look like. Again, you will receive invites to this and very much encourage you to attend to meet some additional folks outside of this pilot opportunity who are implementing these experiences. And so again, just want to pause there before we move into career exploration. If there's questions about those kind of statewide framing for these pieces.
Is this just a year-long grant?
Yeah, Karen, I don't know if you want to add any more to that, but the communities of practice and the piloting would be through this school year. I know some of like the money pieces are a little bit different, but in terms of the actual pilot, it would be for this school year.
Do you know, I mean, in April of 2020, we were supposed to we invited a whole bunch of colleges here for our junior high and surrounding junior highs to come, and you know, that didn't happen. Are a lot of Illinois colleges working with schools, you know, to provide virtual you know, as tours and conversations with students?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of great models out there about doing those virtual tours or engaging with folks one-on-one. I know one of the presenters I want to bring in is they actually did career exploration panels. And as part of that panel, they had their local community college. As you know, industry folks would share about their occupations and their employer. The community college would talk through the programs that they had aligned to direct students into those occupations. So I think doing an event like that, where you're saying, okay, here's some professionals and here's a local resource for how to get there, is really wonderful. And doing that virtually or in a hybrid space can also open up access for those students' families to join and to also hear that information. So you're not as worried about traveling.
Okay, thanks.
Heather, do you know if there's any more plans to add more model programs of study guides?
You know, John's on the line. I think he would say there's no official plans yet.
Yeah, Heather, actually, we are.
Yeah, we do have one.
Yeah, we are actually looking to potentially add an additional guide. I think we're continuing a partnership with the Illinois Community College Board on that work. While we have not made a final decision yet, I think we're leaning more toward the sort of hospitality and culinary related area for that. But that's in process. We'll be making some decisions about that and kind of launching as we have the other groups and advisory committee soon regarding that. And also we will be engaging in some professional development sessions around the current guides as well that are sector specific. So if you're signed up for our different newsletters and the information from Med Systems, we'll be getting out some info on that here within the coming months.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, John. And again, the kind of cadence of presentations for IWIN in those industry areas will be aligned with those model programs of study sessions as well, to make sure as you might be hearing about the coursework and the whole program, you can also then dive deeply into the work-based learning piece of that. Check the chat really quick. Thanks, Nancy. Yep. All right, well, I'm going to move into this career exploration part here. And again, we're going to really dive deeply into these experiences and have communities presenting on it, but just wanted to start off the year here with some resources for you all and talk about some promising practices as communities have presented and as I've engaged myself working with communities. So to make sure we're all on the same page here, as I mentioned, I'll be referring to the Illinois Career Pathways Dictionary. Career exploration is starting at the beginning of the continuum. And from the dictionary, it's defined as an activity such as a job shadow, attendance at a career exposition or employer site visit, providing an individual with the ability to engage directly with employers for the purpose of gaining knowledge of one or more industry sectors or occupations. The piece that I would call out here is just really that direct engagement with employers, or again, thinking through who are your industry folks who could talk through an area, talk through the different occupations within that area. It's making sure that those young people get a chance to ask questions, hear directly from them, get to know them as a human, as a person in this space. And so those can happen in many different ways, but it's really that direct engagement with employers that's so key here for a career exploration experience. And so with that, you know, thinking about what engagement can look like, where are there opportunities? So even as you're thinking about something that might be virtual, how can participants engage in small groups? So in small breakout rooms that are facilitated by a different industry mentor or employer within each room. How can they engage in one-on-one discussions? Sometimes we've seen folks do like informational interviews where you have kind of a room of students and they're sitting with different employers and different industry partners to learn more about them. But also engaging youth who have experience in the industry area. So as you're thinking about your college, your post-secondary education institution partners, where do you have some college students, some alumni from programs, even having high school students speak to middle school students, right? How do you also engage them in that space to share about their experience, especially those high school students who might have completed a career development experience, internship, apprenticeship, right? But your college students can be a great resource for that as well, especially as you think about wanting to have more one-on-one and small group engagement. I've also seen some really fun things, especially at the middle school level, where you would have those industry folks actually facilitate a workshop. So they're keeping students engaged hands-on. I think this is also great for high school too. I think it's great for adults actually as well. If we're actually doing something, learning about the industry as we're engaging in that activity, but really making sure that there's time for questions at the end or time for questions throughout that experience. But that engagement can look all different ways. It's just really about having that direct connection and direct engagement with those employers. And for the participants too, when you're thinking about career exploration, is that this really shouldn't be just an event that they show up to. One of the big concerns that I've heard from communities who have put on career exploration is that, the teachers, the students can sometimes feel like it's just a field trip for the day. It's just something they get out of class to go do. And so to really make it a robust event is how you're thinking about engaging participants before, during, and after that career exploration. So before, how might they be doing some research on the organizations or individuals that they're going to see, developing questions to ask that may be both specific and general. I know in my experience working with youth, sometimes they just don't know the questions to ask, right? And so giving them some space before that event to come up with those and do some research can be really empowering for them to then actually feel confident to ask those questions during the event. But then during, really making sure that whatever staff and your team are there, that they're helping facilitate the presentations, the interactions, they're encouraging questions, right? Sometimes our external partners as well don't necessarily know how to make a presentation or an activity engaging for youth. So where you could be a support in that and be like, no, I think this is going to be better to talk about, or this might be better to do, or hey, can I ask for clarification on that question? If maybe they said something that, the youth in the space are like, I don't know what that is, but I don't even know to ask because I'm so confused about what that is. And then also determining if there's a way, and again, kind of based on any rules or regulations or policies within your space, but how youth might be able to continue to connect with them. So if they have a LinkedIn that they could, invite and try to connect with that individual on, if there's a school email they can provide. A fun thing that we used to do for a kickoff event with my internship program was we would make little business cards for each student that had their name and their school email address on it and what they were looking to be or their post-secondary plans. And that was just a great way for them to, walk around, make connections, and gather business cards from the other industry folks in the room. But then also after, where are they being engaged to reflect on their experience? What insights did they gain? What questions did they still have? To that point about your post-secondary partners, now that they're reflecting on this, understanding it better, how do they also understand what those different post-secondary options are? What are those discussions happening? Where could they be engaged, again, with maybe one or two different local education institutions in your space, or meet directly with an advisor or counselor from there. And then just some other kind of general best practices, whether you're thinking about hosting something virtually or in person, where those presentations can be short and conversational. Students are watching presentations a lot in their classes. They're learning information all day. When they engage with these industry mentors, it's really great if it can be less kind of formal presentation, more just conversation or engagement and activity. Virtual options, I think what we've seen a lot is it's really allowed communities to reach new or partners that they might have, but can't always engage because they're a small business. Maybe they don't even have a physical workplace, right? Maybe they can't travel. You can engage folks from outside of your immediate community, right? So thinking through how you're using virtual in an intentional way. Staying in the life information is also incredible. Youth really want to know, what kind of money do you make? How many hours a week do you work? Do you like what you do? Also really talking through what their pathways have been from high school to the career. I think one of the most empowering pieces about career exploration for students is they can realize that an occupation didn't all have the same path to get there. You can have 5 people in the same role who all have very different paths on how they got there. And that's really helpful for students to understand that there isn't just one way to get a job. Showcasing that industry diversity where you have panelists of different races, genders, personal experience, educational pathways, right? I think the comments even earlier, how do we know what we can or want to be if we're not seeing ourselves in those people, in those spaces? And so the more that you can provide a diverse panel, the more you're going to speak to your students and for them to be able to see themselves in those roles. Also focusing on those individuals who might have early career experiences. I think it's always great to get a CEO, a vice president of a company. It feels cool, it feels flashy. But sometimes, I don't know, they can be very removed from some of the work that's happening on the ground or where your students might be first moving into that space. I don't think many of us graduated and then we're CEO right away, right? So where can you show some of those early employees, those trainees, and they can really speak to students about what it's going to look like when you're first engaging in that industry area, They can tend to be more relevant and engaging sometimes as well. Like there's some really wonderful CEOs too, don't get me wrong, but it can be really wonderful to kind of have that earlier experience. So students feel like that's more tangible, that's more kind of what they're going to at first, and then they might move on to having a higher position. And just again, as mentioned earlier, your support to coach those employers on their jargon, further explaining industry specific content where you can say, like, if you are aligning it to a course or a curriculum or activity in class, be like, hey, we're covering this in class right now. Can you please speak to this, right? And making sure what they're sharing is also connected to what's being accomplished in the classroom. And so as promised and mentioned, have a lot of different resources here for you all. So we have a pilot resource folder just for this group here that we'll be uploading resources and materials and like these presentations and do constantly throughout the year. JFF Jobs for the Future has a really great guidance document too about planning a college and career exploration event. Chicago Public Schools worked with them throughout this past year to put together a work-based learning toolkit, and they have all kinds of tips and checklists and guides along that for experiences along the continuum. And so myself, having worked closely with them, they are aligned to those state frameworks and definitions. But I also included, the information from our design workshop. So that recording, the template, those kind of probing questions. The goal is that you could use something like this, that recording and those templates to actually facilitate a workshop within your own space. And then I also included, again, the link to the resource hub and some kind of targeted webinars and presentations for you all about career exploration experiences from some communities that we had present. And just wanted some questions here for you all as you're thinking about this school year. Will your event be open to all students? How will you really target those students who are most in need of career exploration to be included in this event? I put a flag too, like I know there were a lot of people in their plans talking about some different software pieces that they would purchase. So if you're going to utilize that software, how are you taking that software to then understand and recruit and target students to invite them to those events that are related to the career interest area as they might have submitted, oh my goodness, through that software? How do you also understand, as you're understanding what your students are interested in, then how to kind of target your own partner recruitment or your own speakers or mentors or facilitators for these to connect to what your students are interested in? And then again, just how will direct connection with those industry experts be incorporated? And so just want to pause there. There was a lot, but would love for you all to take a moment before I keep talking about career development experiences. If you want to share out what your pilot plan is for the year, what your thinking is, how it might be changing. If there's any additional resources, models, or best practices you're aware of to share with this group, please feel free to share those out loud and talk through them. Or I see some folks putting things in the chat too. Would always welcome that. And I'm actually going to get, while you all are doing that, a link to our presentation to share here, since I've mentioned a lot of stuff that I'm sure you all want to click on and look at.
Heather, I don't know if maybe Karen would be the best one to answer this question. For that grant, are we still able to make adjustments or amendments to that grant, or is it now set in stone for what we had put in before?
My understanding is that you can still make adjustments. I don't know if Karen, I'm misspeaking there, but my understanding was you could still make an adjustment and just communicate that to Karen.
Hey, Terry, this is Marcy. You can, you have until June 30th, 2022 for the grant. And so you have until May 31st to do any amendments. So you can amend throughout the year for anything that you need to make changes to. Okay.
Fantastic. Thank you for that information.
Sure.
I have a question. We never did submit any kind of a grant type of thing. Our CTE person told us she had signed us up. So would she have the information about what we said we were going to do for our grant?
Yes. Yes,
Okay.
she would.
Okay, thank you.
Uh-huh.
Thanks, Marcy. other, I see some people are writing about some of their plans in the chat here. Again, as you see, like I have Chelsea talking about the Career Ready Labs. If that's something you're doing, we'd love for you all to connect and share. And it's something I'm not familiar with, the College and Career Ready Labs, but might ping you all to be sharing about that process at one of these communities of practice for sure. I love developing the team of students, parents, and teachers. I think especially in that career exploration space, like where you can engage families within those conversations or within those events, or make them aware of what students are hearing about and learning. You know, there's multiple generations within a family, right? There might be adults who are looking for career changes. There might be siblings or family younger than that student who are starting to think about it as well, right? Wonderful. Any other questions or resources or plans that you all want to share with the group? Yeah, and thanks, Cassie. We'll be moving into the career development experience piece here too, but I think this idea about like how you develop professional development for your stakeholders in these experiences is really valuable. So for both the partners and for your own staff, like how they're really understanding those expectations and what it means to have a high quality experience. Well, I'm going to go through this career development experience information here, and then I really do just want to leave time. It sounds like it would be really useful for us to kind of get in some small breakout rooms, share with each other, ask questions of one another, and make some connections in there. Just wanted to make sure we have the framing and information for you all. So within career development experiences, we're moving along the continuum. Like I mentioned earlier, this is further along. So by this time, students have engaged in some career-related coursework. Generally, right, they've engaged in some of these work-based learning experiences, right? That's a best recommended practice. But by the time they're getting into career development experience, they're really ready to engage independently. They're feeling really confident about this industry area that they've been pursuing their pathway in. And now they're going to dive more deeply into that through this opportunity. And so from the Career Pathways Dictionary, the definition of a career development experience, or I'll start saying CDE, from here because it's just a little bit easier, is really thinking about these 6 pieces if you're offering a CDE to be aligned to that dictionary's definition, to be aligned to the expectations for this grant, is that it's a supervised work experience relating to an individual's career area of interest that occurs in a workplace or under authentic working conditions. Again, authentic working conditions, I've said this many times when I talk about CDEs now, was problematized and thought through a little bit more as we engaged in this last year. So where there's been some virtual or some hybrid models, and we've still seen some really high quality CDEs, has been really wonderful to see, just because of the way that that can start to address those barriers like transportation and scheduling, when students aren't always expected to show up in person every day for a CDE. It also should be co-developed by an education provider and at least one employer in the relevant field, really making sure there, again, is it aligned to that student's coursework, their career interest area? Is it aligned to what the skills that are in demand and the expectations that are in demand currently within that industry area from the employer perspective? Participants should be receiving compensation or educational credit. At this point, they are performing work. So when I think about CDEs, we host a high school intern in the Ed Systems office every year. I think about them in the space of, about 50% of their time, they're completing tasks for us as Ed Systems. And about 50% of the time, they're engaging in some PD. So they're attending meetings, they're attending some webinars, they're engaging in some skill development that might still turn into a work product for Ed Systems, but is also really a professional development opportunity for them to gain those skills. But they are ultimately providing work back to that place, so there should be compensation or credit provided. It should also reinforce those foundational professional skills, those essential employability skills, again, applicable across industry area. Students can earn those in any experience that they're doing, but also where you're thinking about incorporating some of those technical skills within those recommended competencies, or those that are connected to some of the courses a student might be taking at the same time they're completing their CDE. Students should also receive a professional skills assessment. There's no defined one for this. I have different examples of it if you'd like to see some examples of those. But you are likely, if you have implemented a CDE before, you likely have something like that maybe just needs to be tweaked a bit, but I have examples too. But it's a really great opportunity for individuals to get feedback on their performance. Where are they really strong in their skills? Where are there areas for improvement? We all have those kind of yearly evaluation meetings, and it's a really great skill for that young person to build about engaging in those kind of constructive conversations, them asking questions, their mentor, their host supervisor asking questions, and giving them feedback as well. And then it should take place for a minimum of 60 total hours. And so it could be more than that. You could do, like, some people will do micro internships where they'll do kind of 2 30-hour CDEs, but really thinking through for an individual to engage and to really understand that area and to get the most out of a CDE, there should be a minimum of 60 total hours. And so I like to put this slide here too. You know, I think sometimes we see the word career development experience, CDE, and we start thinking we have to do something totally new. It really is an umbrella term, a broad term that's covering all these different pieces. It could be what's called an internship, school-based enterprise, supervised agricultural experience, the workplace learning, right? Which I guess like I need to fix my cooperative education here. It could also be a youth apprenticeship, which is also defined in the Career Pathways Dictionary as actually having 450 hours and has a little bit more to it, but that would technically count as a CDE. And so I mentioned earlier, but just wanted to provide some more detail here. As you're thinking about this, we have written in collaboration with ISBE and also in collaboration with DCEO, a career development experience toolkit. DCEO is the Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity. Make sure I'm spelling out acronyms here. But again, it takes you through the whole process, the whole stages of implementation. So what are those expectations for implementing high quality, rigorous work-based learning experiences, provides guidance, tools, and frameworks for offering a career development experience. All throughout this are different best practice examples of organizations and how they're doing this on the ground. A lot of those resources and content in there are based off of what's actually happening in communities throughout Illinois, and some national models as well. And really the goal here is that it sparks thinking about how you might take these pieces and modify them to fit into your own unique context and meet the needs of your stakeholders and your students. So this is not meant to be like you do it exactly this way, but it is very much a guide so that you can take those resources, take those pieces and implement them to have a high quality CDE within your own community. And so just to dive into that a little bit more, there's a full document itself. It's like an over 100-page PDF document. If you love reading large documents, like John on the line, who I know has printed the whole CDE toolkit at some point, please feel free to read the entire PDF. What I would encourage, the way that I like things and kind of why we did the toolkit website, is the website actually takes you through each stage and you can download the specific section. So if you just want to hear about how you do outreach, you can download like the 20-page section on outreach, right? And you can look at the different resources and pieces there. I think the website is one of the most user-friendly, but the whole PDF document is there as well if you want some light weekend reading. One of my favorite things about it too are the customizable templates. So all throughout, there's going to be different Word documents that you can download and you can edit. So there's like host profiles, there's different like those assessments, there's different outreach, check-in pieces, orientations for students, presentations, all kinds of things that you could download and edit directly. One of the, I know in my experience with the internship program was like one of the most time-consuming thing was just literally making the resources. So the hope here is that you have a template you could take from and, you know, copy, paste, delete things, add to as needed, but wouldn't have to take so much bandwidth to create those. And so just a ping here as you think about the stages of implementation, as you go from getting started and thinking about the roles and responsibilities of your team, how you might be providing PD for them, really determining what those industry areas are you're going to focus on in the general model for your CDE, and then moving into your outreach. How are you thinking through how they're going to be communicated so that anyone who's eligible, anyone who really is in need of this is provided the same information. What I hear a lot is that a lot of times these opportunities are communicated through people who are just interested in them or teachers who found out about them somehow. And so how are you thinking through a process so that this is really systemically and in a consistent way getting out to anyone who is in need of this opportunity or who is eligible for it? And then get moving into recruiting and assessing your potential hosts. And I do definitely encourage you all to really think through and assess and reflect on those hosts. Sometimes they're ready to offer a CDE and to support students through that experience. And sometimes maybe they need to be engaged earlier in the continuum and then geared up to offer a CDE. You want to make sure that it's a successful experience for both students and for the hosts. And so there's resources in the toolkit to help you think through that. As you onboard, meeting one-on-one with participants or in those groups, how are you understanding their transportation, their support needs? A big flag here that has gotten me into trouble a few times is if your host has specific HR requirements before that young person enters their space. This can be a really big holdup for individuals. And so if they have to do additional background checks, I know, especially when I worked with banks and when I worked with hospitals, there were all kind of additional HR requirements that students had to go through. So really understanding those timelines to ensure that students can start on what is supposed to be their first day is so crucial. And it's something that has definitely gotten me a couple of times. As you're moving into the during of the CDE, where you're thinking about those check-ins that are occurring within the first days, one of my big pieces is always thinking through how do students and how do your partners know who their points of contact are? How do they understand who to reach out to when things are going well or when they have a question or when things aren't going so well and they're having a challenge, right? Making sure that there's a really clear line of communication and a building of relationships is so crucial to kind of proactively navigate challenges, ensure that successful experience. So where you're kind of having those informal or formal check-ins, including site visits that might happen for a longer term CDE, and especially anyone who's new. If you have a partner who's newly offering a CDE, very much encourage you to go visit that site, see what it looks like, see what the experience is for a student. And also make sure that they're talking through that professional skills assessment, that the student is aware on, the skills that they're developing and they're going to be assessed on. The partner, the mentor, the host is really also supporting that development, providing the right tasks and resources to make sure that that student is engaged in a quality way. And then as you wrap up, where is there an opportunity for both your participants and your hosts to evaluate one another and reflect on their experience? I tend to hear a lot of people focusing on the partner and how it went for them and will they come back to host a student? But you also want to understand from the student, that participant perspective, how did they feel about the experience? What did they learn about that experience? What did they gain? What do they want to write on their resume, their LinkedIn, their portfolios, right? And then understanding too, maybe where there might be conversations you need to have with a host, depending on the student's experience, to do some tweaks and adjustments for next year to make sure that it's a good fit. And also just a flag to gather testimonials. I get a lot of questions about how do you market these things? How do you engage hosts and students to want to do these? Gathering those testimonials from your students, from your partners is really helpful as you would want to market this experience and expand it. And just a couple of things here when you think about those different CDE models, you have your typical internships, you have tasks, deliverables that are assigned on a daily or weekly basis. Like I mentioned earlier, there's some really great opportunities to do those in-house pilots, especially as you might be doing this for the first time ever, and you're a little nervous about engaging a partner right away and not having it go well. We've seen some communities do, like I know they're on the line here, where they had an IT internship. And so those students actually worked with their in-house IT department to bring back the computers that students had to return from the school year. That's a good way to pilot this, but in a kind of a safe space, right? Working within in-house. Those micro internships where you might have some project-based tasks. There's things that hosts wish they had time to research or time to complete, can be really great in here. I love when I see departmental rotations. BJC Healthcare in East St. Louis is a great example of this, of really taking students through, they have their mentors, but every so often they're working with a new department within the hospital, especially as we think about students' understanding of health science and okay, I can be a nurse or I can be a doctor, when actually there's so many different opportunities within that space. So how they can rotate and really understand that and also engage in tasks is really fun. And entrepreneurial endeavors too. I think it would be really exciting for you to understand where some of your young people actually have their own businesses and how you might be able to connect them with a mentor to help guide them through that and validate that as a career development experience. I actually went on a tour to Pontiac High School, probably when I first started a couple of years ago now, and was shown all the different SAEs, those supervised agricultural experiences, which were a lot of really entrepreneurial endeavors that were incredible. There's also, this past year, been a lot of people doing some exciting things with virtual and with hybrid types opportunities, thinking about work-based learning in a new context. So through IWIN, you'll start to hear about some of the communities that are actually piloting Practera, and some of y'all might be on this line here too, and how they're thinking about using this platform that has self-guided modules and takes students through a whole CDE or through even a team-based challenge to complete those, but they can do it in a fully virtual or a hybrid setting. And so they're piloting that at no cost this next school year. If that's something, I put information here, but please feel free to reach out and we can talk about that. But also to that PD piece, right? There is a tension when you're building out your work-based learning program about the design of it and also who the facilitators or who the coordinators are of that, right? It's one thing to have a platform, or it's one thing to have a design. It's another thing to have it really implemented. So how are you providing space to offer some guidance, time for reflection? And we're doing that a bit here through the actual Practera platform, but it's really just for work-based learning generally. But helps to really increase that awareness of all the different mechanics that make work-based learning successful. I know I have some PD participants on the line here. And just my last piece here, and then I have some CDE resources and take some time for questions too, and do some breakout rooms and connecting with each other, is thinking through that participant experience in a CDE. So one of the best pieces about it is that students are exposed to a new environment, they're exposed to new expectations. Students tend to understand school. They tend to understand how to go through that flow. They meet their teacher. They kind of figure them out that first week, right? They know how that kind of quote unquote space, that game works, right? But then they go to an employer and they're there and it can be totally different, right? And it can be very intimidating, can be anxiety inducing at first, but it's a major growth opportunity from students to have that new environment, to have someone who has expectations that are different than maybe anyone they've ever engaged with before, to really support that growth of their essential employability and technical competencies. And they really should be getting that authentic quality engagement. They should ultimately be building social capital. They should be building a network of folks that they can call on later in life, throughout their life, as they might be thinking about a new opportunity or wanting to know more about something, really building that network to have more access to spaces and more access to direct knowledge about an industry area. And they should, as I mentioned earlier, they might have taken coursework, they should have engaged in some previous work-based learning. They should be valued as a resource of talent. They have background knowledge, they have lived experience. They should be recognized as a benefit to that host. So it's definitely something where they should be provided professional development and support from the host, but they are also going to provide value and they can provide insights. I think a lot about if there's certain ways that things are done at an employer partner, having that intern come in and talk about like, why do you do it this way? Like, why couldn't it be like this? Can actually be a really valuable thing for that employer to understand. We've had some employers even had students like look through some of their manuals or through their directions to see if they even make sense anymore. And then the last piece here is, again, all these different resources. So we have a specific pilot resource folder for the career development experiences, link the toolkit in here again, also link the recording and then the template from our design workshop to, again, watch kind of like it's about a 15-20 minute recording, view that and then work together as a team to start designing and entering on a template. Again, the templates have to be this way. They're just really there for you to capture your model. And then linked in some specific presentations and webinars here about CDEs, both in health sciences and then also a virtual internship that North Chicago Community High School piloted. And just some questions again for you all as you're thinking through your CDE, how you're preparing students, how you're determining them ready for this experience with that host partner, where the expectations, timeline, their role is being made clear, and how will you know the skills of students developing and how will you support those that might need improvement, right, as they're moving along in their CDE. And again, before we kind of move into breakout rooms and spend some time here talking to each other, would love if you all want to share out your plans, if there's other resources, models, best practices. This is not everything. This is just kind of something to get you all started as you begin your school year. We'll have a lot more to come within our communities of practice, but we'd love to hear from you all. Check the chat too. Yeah, and thanks, Kelly. Excited for that work with your regional employers for the manufacturing pathway to create internships.
Heather, I'll jump in there. In our region, we were looking to develop some internships and apprenticeships using the grant money to help create paid internships for students in our low socioeconomic communities that couldn't afford to leave paid jobs to go and take internships. So working with employers to do refund them or give them money for hosting fees for when they host an intern in their company, that we would then reimburse them for money that they had paid out for those positions. And kind of going along, I know you were saying with like manufacturers and limitations for HR, we've been trying to find a lot of opportunity working with manufacturers to where if students aren't allowed to use equipment, like during that phase of their internship, that they would just job shadow someone using that equipment. So they're still able to gain some experience, but then finding opportunities for them within the company to do like quality control or warehousing or the shipping or the engineering departments or the sales department. So they're still learning about the company and the product that they are, going to look to make later on, but they're just not allowed to use the equipment that's making those products at the time because of their age limitations.
That's great, Terry. And I think that's a really great kind of, I'll call it a loophole, right? Where, so often we hear, well, students just can't deal with the equipment, so we can't do the internship. It's like, well, there's ways we can make that work, right? And so, a lot of times like manufacturing and also in health sciences, if you all are running into barriers there, trying to get students to access those types of CDEs, we have lots of folks we can connect you with who have worked through that, done that on the ground. We'll definitely, I assume that's going to be an area of interest for this group as one of our communities of practice to talk through how folks have done that. But I love that they're still seeing the equipment, but finding a way to meet the legal requirements. Terry, thanks for that. And also the piece about, the payment. I love that it's like just getting students in there, right? So they're getting in there, the employer's starting to work with them, right? But the payment's taken care of. And so it's building that capacity for now the employer to say, you know what, this went really well, actually, and I would love to do it again. And maybe eventually I'm going to put a budget line item in. That would be great. Awesome. Well, I do want to spend some time just for you all to connect with each other. I talked a lot this time. I plan to not talk as much the other times. I wanted to make sure that you all had a lot of resources and information and those materials to kind of kick off this work for the school year. But we'd love to get you into breakout rooms and just, can do a couple of things. Talk about what you need to talk about in that space. But if you want to share your plan, and as you're hearing others' plans, provide your own insights, maybe ask some questions as you're hearing about what they're sharing to help them think through their plan. I would also, if you just kind of want to reflect on what was shared today, if there's certain insights, certain questions, or certain ways that you're thinking about how you could incorporate what was shared today, would love to just create an opportunity from that. And then I'll bring us back in about like 10-ish minutes to do some closing and next steps. Folks are joining here again. Any good insights, conversations that we're having in your rooms? Something you're taking away from today?
We talked a lot about trying to reach middle school kids and like the work that grades 3 through 8, some of the people are doing is awesome, just to try and get in front of, even younger and presenting what, our the CDE and all that to younger students as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Like where they can go on their pathway. Like, here's what you're doing now, but you can access these opportunities as you move along. And that's awesome. Welcome back, everyone. I think we've got everybody back from the rooms here. Just want to take a moment before we do some next steps. Again, if there's, Jessica was just sharing out some insights gained. If there's certain insights you got from today or within your conversations or questions that you're still kind of grappling with, or just any reflections from the day-to-day or conversations generally.
Heather, I got a question, and I don't know if you can align some of us together, but based on our group that we met, there's some schools that are doing things as a high school district, and then there's some schools that are doing it on a middle school or like a K through 8 program. So is there a way we can kind of align up, either in the future next meeting, or if you can send out a link on which schools are doing what or which regions are doing what? Because I think that would help for all of us to learn what we're doing best practices is kind of per that grade level, if that makes any sense.
No, absolutely. And thanks for that, Michael. There's going to be, I have a Google form for you all to kind of, that I'm going to do here in just a moment to submit like your interest in kind of getting in groups like that. And as we move forward in communities of practice, I'm going to start to try some different like themed breakout rooms. So if you're doing like, a middle school career exploration, if you're doing a high school CDE, right, in different industry areas, as looking through the plans and figuring out what those different kind of themed rooms can be and who's attending each community of practice, we'll get you all in those thematic breakout rooms, but can also connect you in between as well.
We had some discussion, Heather, in our group just about some of the difficulties now kind of planning for events like college and career fairs where you're planning for them to be in person, but not sure if that's going to hold. So just acknowledging that those continued difficulties and the uncertainties that are impacting the work right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, John. I think the need for a backup plan is kind of, we're all just, we're all always thinking about that, right? Okay, so I have this plan and what if it all gets shut down? Like what is going to be my backup or my other plan to still engage partners and students? Well, thank you all for today. I know we have about 5 minutes left. I wanted to give you even some time while you're here or afterwards. So I'm going to put a form in the chat here. And would love for you all to, complete that now and take these few moments as I kind of review some next steps or complete it later if you're needing to hop off and go to a different meeting. But would just really love to know from you all some different feedback about today's session, about some different insights you got or questions that are still remaining for you. I think, Michael, that point about how you can get connected to others in your space would be some great feedback to have there. Also just some requests of content for future sessions and even too some preferred days and times to schedule these. I know initially there was a doodle poll sent out to schedule this one, but as you might be thinking about anyone else who should be included, as you're thinking about your own schedule, who else should be included and what time would work best for them as well. Maybe it's an earlier in the morning or later in the day. I'm very open to that. Want to make sure that as many folks can join and connect through these communities of practice. But also your interest in being added to both the IWIN listserv and then also creating some separate listservs for this pilot. So if you're doing career exploration, if you're doing career development experience, and how you might be able to kind of have a group email type chat. We've got Sarah on the line here. I know it can help me figure out exactly what that looks like, but to get you all connected and talking to each other beyond this. And then again, if you have any additional resources or best practices that you want to share broadly, I can link those in and follow-ups to the group and include them within our pilot resource folders as well. And so as you're looking through that, maybe completing it or kind of getting ready to hop off here to the next thing, I know it's beginning of school for folks. The next steps are really to submit that Google form, provide feedback on today, input for future convenings. And our next community practice will be in October for this pilot group, but we will have that September IWIN, which there's, designate interest that you want to be involved in that. There's also a link within this presentation to subscribe directly to the newsletter and be invited. But we'll be engaging through IWIN in September, and then this pilot community of practice will be in October. And again, if there's additional questions that you have, I don't have anything after this, so I'm happy to stay on the line if any of you want to continue to chat. And I put our contact information here too for both myself and Karen, as you might have questions about, the grant and money and maybe deadlines. Karen would be your person as you have questions about designing, implementing a career exploration or career development experience. I can very much be a resource for you. But thank you all again so much for today. Have a wonderful start to your school year. I know some of you have already started. And just thank you for joining and spending time here today.